You know exactly the feeling. You're sitting in this, like, really stuffy conference room, or maybe you're just staring at a grid of faces on a video call.
Oh, yeah, the endless soul-crushing video call grid.
Right. And you suddenly realize you have been debating the exact same point for, I don't know, 45 minutes. Egos are flaring up. People are talking over each other.
Then there's always that one person aggressively playing devil's advocate just to hear themselves speak.
Yes, exactly. The extroverts are dominating the airwaves. The introverts have totally checked out, and literally nothing is getting decided. It's chaotic, it's exhausting, and it is a massive soul-sucking drain on your time and energy.
It really is.
You walk away from that meeting feeling like you've just run a marathon in quicksand, and you think to yourself, there just has to be a better way to work.
I mean, it is basically the defining pain point of modern professional life. You know, the circular, completely ego-driven meeting, it breeds conflict, it wastes incredible amounts of time, and honestly worse, it rarely produces the best ideas.
No, it usually just produces the idea championed by the loudest person in the room.
Exactly. But we just assume this is the cost of doing business. We assume that, well, collaboration intrinsically requires friction. Like, we believe that to forge a good idea, you have to strike it with the hammer of argument.
But what if that core assumption is just, flat out wrong? What if there is a way to completely rewire how a group of people, how you and your specific team approach problem solving?
That's a huge question.
Today, we are exploring a solution that actually cures this modern plague. It's called parallel thinking. And it's the core framework of Edward de Bono's groundbreaking book, Six Thinking Hats.
Such a fantastic book.
It really is. And according to the book, this isn't just some abstract academic management theory that looks good on a whiteboard but completely fails in reality. This is a practical, deeply psychological tool that has revolutionized productivity for some of the biggest, most complex organizations on the planet.
Yeah, and the statistics provided in the book are genuinely staggering. To give you an idea of the scale we are talking about, consider a massive multinational corporation like ABB.
Okay, yeah.
According to the text, ABB used to spend 30 days, an entire month of high-level executive time on their multinational project team discussions. 30 days of arguing, posturing, and trying to align competing interests.
Just a month of pure friction.
Right. But once they implemented the Six Hats method, those exact same discussions were reduced to 2 days.
I mean, let's just pause and think about that.
Yeah.
30 days down to 2 days.
It's almost unbelievable.
It is. That implies that for 28 of those days, they weren't actually problem solving at all. They were just, managing egos and fighting through the friction of their own communication style.
Yeah, that is a terrifying thought for any manager listening to this right now. Like, how much of your work is actually just ego management disguised as work?
Exactly. And ABB isn't an isolated case, right?
No, not at all. A researcher from a top IBM laboratory reported that this method reduced their meeting times to 1/4 of what they used to be.
Wow.
And then there's the example of Statoil in Norway, which really highlights the mechanism of this method under pressure. They were dealing with a massive problem on an offshore oil rig.
Oh, man. High stakes.
Very high stakes. This wasn't a theoretical corporate strategy. This was a physical crisis that was costing the company roughly $100,000 a day in lost production and idle resources.
Right. And in a high-stakes crisis, like an oil rig failure, the natural human instinct is panic and self-preservation. Every engineer in the room either wants to be the hero with the instant solution, or they just want to make sure they aren't the one getting blamed for the failure.
Exactly. It's pure survival mode.
You can just imagine the screaming matches, like, it's the drill pressure. No, it's the valve, and I told you we should have replaced it. It's just a recipe for hours of useless arguing while the company literally bleeds money.
Precisely. But instead of letting that natural panic dictate the room, they introduced the Six Hats method to the team. They forced a structured, parallel approach to the crisis. And according to the text, the problem was solved in exactly 12 minutes.
Well, it's minutes. Are you serious?
12 minutes. The $100,000 a day bleed was reduced to 0. And not by magic, but by systematically removing the friction of argument so the engineers could actually, apply their expertise to the problem.
12 minutes to solve a $100,000 daily leak. That is wild. So the mission of this deep dive is simple but highly ambitious. We are going to completely rewire how you approach problem-solving, decision-making, and collaboration.
Yes.
We have fully internalized this material, and we're going to break it down so you can start using it immediately, whether you're running a Fortune 500 company or just trying to organize, I don't know, a neighborhood block party. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To really grasp why the six hats method is so transformative and how it actually works, we first have to understand why our default way of thinking is so incredibly broken.
And to understand that, we basically have to go back in time, roughly 2,300 years.
Okay, time travel, I like it.
Yeah. According to the book, the fundamental flaw in Western thinking is that it's entirely based on an adversarial, argument-based system. We think of argument as a natural law of human interaction, but it's really not.
Right. It was invented.
Exactly. It was a specifically designed intellectual architecture created by what the author cheekily refers to as the Greek Gang of Three, which is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We inherited their system. It runs in the background of our society like an operating system. And in the modern world, it is actively holding us back.
Let's look at this Gang of Three, because this was a huge light bulb moment for me when I was reading the text. First, you have Socrates. And Socrates is held up as this, like, pinnacle of intellectual pursuit.
Oh, absolutely. The ultimate philosopher.
Right. But Socrates was obsessed with dialectic and argument. He wasn't a builder. He was a dismantler. He saw his primary role as pointing out what was wrong with someone else's definition.
Yeah.
The book points out a fascinating, almost tragic statistic about his dialogues, at least as they were recorded by Plato. In 80% of the dialogues Socrates was involved in, there is absolutely no constructive outcome. None.
That's crazy. 80%.
Yeah. The entire exercise is just Socrates poking holes in someone's incorrect usage of concepts like justice or love. It's entirely focused on destruction, not creation.
And we all know someone exactly like that in our professional lives. You know, the person who contributes nothing original to a brainstorm, but is just brilliant at pointing out the fatal flaw in every single idea presented.
Yes.
The permanent critic.
Right. And we reward that behavior. We call it rigorous thinking. But as the book points out, pointing out what is wrong does not magically reveal what is right. Totally. Then we have Plato. Plato introduced this incredibly pervasive idea that the ultimate truth was always hidden below appearances. He used the famous analogy of the cave.
Ah, the cave shadows.
Right. Imagine people chained up in a dark cave, only able to see the shadows of reality projected on the wall by a fire behind them. This instilled a deep cultural belief that as we go through life, we are only seeing shadows.
Which means we can't trust what we see.
Exactly. Therefore, we must argue, we must interrogate, we must fiercely debate to uncover the hidden truth that's supposedly being concealed from us.
Which naturally breeds suspicion, right? Like if you present a proposal in a meeting, the Platonic mindset assumes you are presenting a shadow.
Right.
So my job as your colleague is to aggressively question you to find the hidden flaw or the hidden agenda you aren't showing me. It turns collaboration into an interrogation.
Wow. Yeah, it totally does. And finally, you have Aristotle. Aristotle comes along and systematizes everything with inclusion and exclusion logic.
Yeah.
He essentially created a system of definitive boxes.
The famous Aristotelian categories?
Yeah. From our past experiences, we create categories, definitions, and principles. When we encounter something new, our immediate ingrained instinct is to judge it. We look at it and ask, which box does this belong in?
It's just binary.
Exactly. It's either in the box or it's not in the box. There's no half in, half out. It is a binary system of judgment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire Western thinking system, bequeathed to us by this Gang of Three, is obsessed with what is. It is a system built entirely on analysis, judgment, and argument.
Right.
Now, the author concedes that in a perfectly stable world, this is actually a very effective system. If the world never changes, then the standard situations of the past, those boxes Aristotle gave us, will always apply. You just analyze the new problem, judge which historical box it fits into, and apply the historical solution.
But here is the fatal flaw, right?
Right.
We do not live in a stable world.
Not even close.
We live in a world of just accelerating technological, social, and economic change. In a dynamic, rapidly shifting world, the standard situations of the past may no longer apply at all. The historical boxes are obsolete.
Right.
So if you try to force a novel, modern problem into an ancient Aristotelian box, you fail. Instead of just judging our way forward based on what is, we desperately need a methodology to design our way forward based on what can be.
And to illustrate how absurd and frankly counterproductive our default argument system can be when trying to design a way forward, there's a brilliant, really funny story in the book.
Oh, the car story. I love this one.
Yes. A man decides to paint his car half black and half white, straight down the middle. His friends are completely baffled and ask him why on earth he would do such a strange, ugly thing to his car.
Yeah.
And his response is, because it is such fun whenever I have an accident to hear the witnesses in court contradict each other.
I love that story so much because it perfectly captures the trap we are in. In a typical argument in a boardroom, both sides are often entirely correct. They're just looking at completely different aspects of the same highly complex situation. Going back to the car, one witness is standing on the north side of the street and says under oath that the car was white. The other witness is on the south side and swears under oath the car was black.
And they're both telling the truth.
Right. They're both factually right based on their vantage point. But because of our adversarial Socrates-style system, they're forced to argue. The lawyer for the white car witness has to try to prove the black car witness is either a liar, legally blind, or a complete fool.
Yeah, and this confrontational model where one person must be wrong for the other to be right is actually viewed as aggressive, primitive, and highly non-constructive by many other cultures around the world. I mean, it wastes energy on defeating an opponent rather than exploring the subject.
Which brings us to the paradigm shift that cures the disease: parallel thinking. Now, I want to challenge this right out of the gate. When I first read about parallel thinking, my immediate red flag went up.
Okay.
Well, if you force everyone in a room to think in parallel, to look in the same direction at the same time, doesn't that just create a massive echo chamber? Like, how is parallel thinking different from groupthink, where everyone is just terrified to disagree with the boss?
Oh, that is the most common and really the most important misconception. Groupthink is forced agreement on a conclusion. It's the suppression of dissenting facts or opinions to maintain harmony.
Okay.
Parallel thinking is completely different. It is forced agreement on the direction of focus at any given moment, and that focus explicitly includes dedicated time for harsh negativity and risk assessment.
Okay, walk me through how that actually looks. The book uses the analogy of a house, right?
Yes, the house analogy is perfect. Imagine a large, beautiful country house. You have 4 people standing around it, but they are standing on 4 different sides, front, back, left, and right. Using our traditional argument-based thinking, these 4 people would get on walkie-talkies and furiously debate what the house looks like. The person in front describes a grand oak door and towering columns. The person in back says, "You're crazy, there are no columns. It's a stone patio and a garden."
And they just yell at each other.
Exactly. Each insists their view is the correct view of the overall house, and the others must be completely wrong.
But with parallel thinking, you eliminate the walkie-talkies. Instead of arguing from fixed, static positions, all 4 people physically walk around the house together.
Right.
They all stand in the front, shoulder to shoulder, and look at the columns together. They agree, yes, there are columns here. Then as a group, they walk to the side and look at the windows, then the back, then the other side.
They're mapping it out.
Exactly. At every single moment, everyone is looking in the exact same direction. They're looking in parallel. They are fully exploring the entire subject 360 degrees without ever needing to prove each other wrong.
And here is where it defeats groupthink. If, during this parallel exploration of, let's say, the back patio, 2 contradictory views emerge, say, one person thinks the patio stone is slate and another thinks it's limestone, they do not stop the exploration to have a fight.
They don't.
No. Both views are simply noted and laid down alongside each other on the record. You say, okay, we have a disagreement on the stone type, noted. And you keep moving. If a choice absolutely must be made later, you make it then. But the goal is to map the entire terrain together first. The emphasis is always on exploring and designing a way forward, not proving who is right in the moment.
Okay, I buy the theory. It sounds beautiful. But let's get into the messy reality.
Sure.
How do we practically execute this? How do you force a group of arguing egos who have been deeply trained for decades in the Greek system of argument, who have MBAs that taught them to aggressively defend their positions? How do you force them to suddenly hold hands, walk around the house together, and look in the same direction?
It's a big ask.
It is. According to the book, you do it by playing a game with very specific, unbreakable rules. You use the 6 hats. But before we get into the colors, it is vital to understand what these hats actually represent. The hats are directions to look. They are not descriptions of what has happened.
This is a crucial distinction that so many people get wrong when they first try this. Saying, let's have some white hat thinking, is a deliberate, forward-looking command to focus exclusively on data and information from this exact second onward.
Right.
It is not a matter of letting everyone argue for an hour, creating a massive unstructured mess, and then using the hats retrospectively to label or describe the things that were just said. Oh, Jim, what you said 10 minutes ago is very black hat. That is completely useless.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all.
A description looks backward at what has happened. A direction looks forward at what is about to happen. It's the difference between walking into a kitchen and saying, I see you have cooked some eggs, versus saying, I want you to turn around and look out the eats window.
And there is a massive fatal trap here that we need to address right away.
No.
If you are a manager listening to this and you take only one thing away from this deep dive, let it be this. The hats are not categories of people.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yes, you do not ever point to a colleague and say, Sarah is our black hat person, or David is a green hat thinker. They are modes of behavior, not permanent personality types.
This is so important because modern corporate culture, and frankly, modern psychology loves to put people in boxes. We are obsessed with it. Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, DIC assessments. Are you an INTJ? Are you a type A? Are you an extrovert?
Oh, totally.
The inherent danger, which the author points out, is that once you put someone in a psychological box, they tend to stay there. It reinforces that ancient Aristotelian what is.
Exactly. If you take a team member who is naturally, a bit cautious and detail-oriented, and you explicitly label them the black hat person for the team, you are giving them permission to stop trying in every other area.
Yep.
They will lean into that identity hard. They will overcompensate. They will sink even deeper into being the permanent critic, and they will feel entirely justified doing it because, hey, that's their type. You have just institutionalized the friction you were trying to eliminate.
It's a disaster for team dynamics. The book's method requires the exact opposite. The hats are temporary roles that everyone must play.
I like to think of it like driving a manual transmission car.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
If you drive a stick shift, you use all the gears to navigate the road successfully. You don't get in the car and say, you know what, I'm just a second gear kind of driver. That's my personality.
Your car would break down.
If you do that, your engine will literally explode when you hit the highway. Every single thinker, to be effective, must be capable and skilled at using all the gears, all the hats. Putting people in permanent hat boxes destroys the entire system. The magic, the actual mechanical leverage of this framework, is that everyone uses every hat at the exact same time.
To really visualize the profound difference this makes in the energy of a meeting, the book contrasts two different styles of problem solving. Western meetings are historically like marble sculpture.
Oh, this metaphor is brilliant. I love this one.
It really is. In a marble sculpture approach, you start with a massive rough block of stone. In a meeting context, this is usually a fully formed, highly detailed proposal that one person or one department brings to the table. They drop this giant block of marble on the desk.
Right. Here's my master plan.
Exactly. Then everyone else in the room pulls out their chisels and starts chipping away at it with their arguments. They carve off the pieces they don't like. They attack the cost, the timeline, the design. The person who brought the marble gets defensive and tries to protect it.
Naturally.
Eventually, you are left with whatever tiny, compromised piece of stone survives the criticism. It is inherently reductive and adversarial.
Contrast that with what the book calls map making, which aligns closely with traditional Japanese-style business meetings. In a map-making meeting, participants do not walk in the door with a preformed block of marble to defend. In fact, doing so would be considered highly presumptuous.
Yeah, totally different vibe.
They come to listen. Everyone takes turns putting down neutral information. Slowly, collaboratively, piece by piece, a rich, detailed map of the current situation is drawn. No one is arguing because no one has brought a ready-made idea to fight over.
The ideas just emerge.
Exactly. The possible solutions emerge naturally as the map of the terrain becomes clear. Once the terrain is fully accurately mapped, the best route forward usually becomes incredibly obvious to everyone in the room.
And the six hats method allows Westerners to adopt this highly effective map-making approach without having to, completely change their underlying culture or go to years of therapy.
Right.
And one of the most brilliant, sneaky psychological tricks of the entire method is how it handles the human ego. Because let's face it, you can't just tell highly successful professionals to leave their egos at the door. It doesn't work.
It never works.
In a traditional meeting, people use arguments to parade their ego. They shoot down a junior colleague's idea to show how clever and experienced they are. They dig their heels in to establish dominance. The ego is tied entirely to being right and proving others wrong.
But the six hats method doesn't try to suppress the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Suppressing ego is basically impossible. Instead, it brilliantly redirects it. You still get to show off. But now the rules of the game have changed.
Right.
The only way to show off is by playing the assigned game better than anyone else. You exert your ego by proving you can be an incredibly sharp, ruthless, cautious thinker when the black hat is requested. And then 5 minutes later, you prove you can be a wildly imaginative, unconstrained creative thinker when the green hat is requested.
It's like acting.
Yes. You show off by performing the requested behavior on command. Your ego becomes tied to your performance as a versatile, dynamic thinker, rather than stubbornly defending a single, static position.
Exactly. It bypasses the need for deep psychoanalysis of your team. It doesn't ask anyone to change their fundamental personality or heal their childhood trauma. It just asks them to follow the specific rules of the behavior requested at that specific moment. It's role play, and humans are incredibly good at role play when the rules are clear.
We really are.
Now, let's begin to actually draw this map. Let's look at the first specific direction of thought. Every map needs terrain. It needs raw material. Gathering that raw material requires the white hat.
The white hat. Okay. Think of a blank sheet of white paper. Think of a computer printout. The white hat is entirely about information. When the facilitator calls for white hat thinking, the entire group is commanded to act like a computer.
Beep boop.
Exactly. The focus is exclusively on neutral facts, figures, and data. You do not offer interpretation. You do not offer arguments. You do not offer your opinion on the data. You just lay out the information. What information do we currently possess? What information is missing? What specific questions do we need to ask to get the missing information?
And honestly, acting like a computer is actually incredibly unnatural and difficult for the human brain, which is why the white hat requires intense discipline to enforce.
It's so hard to not give an opinion.
Right. In our Western argument culture, we are so used to using facts merely as ammunition to support a pre-existing conclusion. We state the conclusion we want first. We need to cut the marketing budget, and then we selectively cherry-pick only the facts that back up that conclusion.
Totally backwards.
The white hat demands the exact opposite. It demands intellectual purity. Just the facts, please. Lay them on the table. But, as the book points out, we also have to be very careful not to let the white hat become an excuse to just drown the room in useless data.
Right. The book mentions this incredible historical example, the massive antitrust monopoly case against IBM in the United States decades ago. The government demanded facts from IBM. They wanted all the information.
And IBM delivered.
Oh, they maliciously complied. They effectively backed up a fleet of dump trucks and buried the court in roughly 7 million documents.
7 million?
It was such a staggering, incomprehensible mountain of information that no judge or jury could possibly process it, effectively making the case untriable for years. The lesson there is that white hat thinking isn't just about vomiting data onto the table. It requires focused questions to extract the specific relevant information needed to draw the map.
And when we are dealing with information in the real world, we have to acknowledge a practical reality. Not all facts are created equal.
Very true.
We rarely have absolute, double-blind, peer-reviewed, scientifically rigorous proof for every single thing we need to discuss in a Tuesday morning status meeting. So, to keep the white hat practical, the book introduces a vital two-tier system. Tier 1 is checked facts. These are hard, proven, indisputable realities. The revenue for Q3 was exactly X dollars. The server crashed at 2 a.m.
But if we only relied on Tier 1, we'd be totally paralyzed. So Tier 2 is believed facts. These are things we strongly believe to be true but haven't fully rigorously verified yet.
Right.
This is where I like to use a modern analogy. Think about using a large language model, like an AI chatbot. Sometimes the AI gives you a hard, verified fact from a database. Other times, it hallucinates something that sounds incredibly plausible but might be slightly off. To use AI effectively, you need it to give you a confidence score on its output. The white hat tier system is essentially a human confidence score.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy. You absolutely need that second tier of believed facts. A team member might say, under the white hat, I believe I read in an industry journal last week that our main competitor is struggling with their supply chain.
Which is great info.
It's incredibly useful information for the map, even if they don't have the competitor's internal financial audit in their hands. But the crucial, unbreakable rule is that you must frame it correctly. You cannot present a Tier 2 believed fact as a Tier 1 checked fact. You have to be rigorously honest about its status on the spectrum of likelihood.
And that spectrum of likelihood is so practical for everyday meetings. It ranges from always true and hard fact down to, by and large, often, occasionally true, all the way down to remote long shot. Under the white hat, you are allowed to introduce information from anywhere on that spectrum, provided you frame it with absolute accuracy.
Exactly. For example, how do we handle anecdotes? Humans love anecdotes. The book talks about this. An anecdote is a single data point. It is not a statistical trend. You might say, there was a man who fell out of an airplane without a parachute and survived. Or, in a business context, the Ford Edsel was designed using extensive state-of-the-art market research, and it was a total disaster.
Right. Those are valid historical instances. They actually happened. But under the white hat, they must be presented strictly as isolated anecdotes. You cannot use the Ford Edsel story to aggressively claim market research always leads to failure, therefore we shouldn't do it.
That's a huge leap.
That is an interpretation, a judgment, and a massive logical leap. It violates the purity of the white hat. You can put the Ford Edsel fact on the map, but you can't use it as a weapon.
The mental discipline required here is profound. The author likens the ideal white hat thinker to a young schoolboy emptying his pockets onto a table for inspection. Out comes a coin, some chewing gum, a weird rock, maybe a dead frog.
Gross, but okay.
Right, he just lays the specimens out on the table. He doesn't argue about why the knock is better than the gum. He doesn't try to prove the frog is valuable. He just presents the neutral inventory of what is there.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Imagine forcing a politician or a trial lawyer or a highly aggressive sales executive to genuinely wear the white hat.
Made struggle.
It goes against every single instinct of their professional training. Imagine a lawyer in court. They might say, the defendant returned home at 6:30 a.m. because he was out gambling all night.
Objection.
Exactly. If the judge was strictly enforcing the white hat, they would have to slam a gavel and say, Counselor, that is an interpretation and a judgment. The pure Tier 1 white hat fact is that a witness observed the defendant returning at 6:30 a.m. The reason why he returned then is your assumption, and it does not belong on this map yet. It forces a level of intellectual honesty that is almost shocking when you first experience it.
It is shocking, and it can feel very cold, which leads to the natural pushback. Humans are not computers. We aren't just cold, hard, rational facts. We are messy.
Very messy.
We have biases, we have gut instincts, we have irrational fears and wild hopes. What do we do with our humanity? If the white hat bans emotion, doesn't the system just turn us into robots?
It would if we stopped there. But we don't suppress our humanity. We legitimize it.
Yeah.
But we do it in a very specific, fiercely contained way. This is where we deliberately take off the cold white hat and put on the red hat. Think of fire. Think of warmth. Think of blood. The red hat is the dedicated mode for emotions, feelings, hunches, and deep intuition.
And the default operating procedure in most corporate environments is to pretend that emotions simply do not exist. You aren't supposed to be emotional in a high-level business meeting. It's considered unprofessional.
Right. Leave your feelings at home.
But of course you are emotional. We all are. Every decision we make is colored by emotion. So what happens when we ban emotion? Because we aren't allowed to just say, I hate this idea and I hate the guy proposing it, we disguise our emotion as logic.
Oh, people do this all the time.
We invent elaborate, pseudo-rational arguments to kill an idea, simply because our gut doesn't like it. We waste hours debating false logic when the real issue is just a feeling. The red hat strips away this disguise entirely. It provides a formal, official, safe channel to just put the raw, unfiltered feeling directly on the map.
And here is the ultimate unbreakable rule of the red hat. When I read this, it blew my mind because it is so entirely countercultural. Under the red hat, there is absolutely no need, and frankly no permission, to justify or explain your feelings.
Yeah.
You just state them. Full stop.
What's fascinating here is why that rule exists. It seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't we want to know why someone is afraid?
You'd think so.
But if people are forced to justify their feelings, if they know they will be interrogated on their logic, they will immediately self-censor. They will only share safe feelings that sound logical and defensible, which completely defeats the purpose of the hat. We don't want safe feelings. We need the messy truth.
Right. So if the CEO says, okay, team, let's do a quick red hat go around on this proposed merger with Company X, you are legally allowed, within the rules of the game, to say, putting on my red hat, I feel like this is a terrible mistake. I have a deeply unsettling gut feeling about their leadership team, and I am anxious about our job security.
And nobody can question you.
Right. The CEO is explicitly not allowed to say, why? Give me your proof, show me the data. There is no data, it's a feeling.
Exactly. Emotions and intuition are real data points in themselves. They color our entire perception of the map we are making. If a project team has a massive background radiation of fear or suspicion or jealousy, it is going to warp the entire decision-making
I'll
process.
complete.
If you don't acknowledge it, it acts like a magnet under a compass, throwing all your logic off course. The red hat makes that background emotional radiation visible. It puts it on the table so it can be factored into the final decision.
The book also does a great job diving deep into the different types of feelings covered by the red hat, because it's not just raw, primitive emotions like anger, fear, or joy. It also covers highly complex intuition. There's a huge difference between a child being afraid of the dark and an experienced 30-year veteran real estate developer looking at an empty dirt lot and saying, I just smell money here.
That is a critical distinction. That developer probably can't articulate all the hundreds of subtle variables their brain is processing in that moment, the subtle shift in traffic patterns, the demographic changes in the adjacent zip code, the nuanced zoning laws, their subconscious processes, all of it, and simply outputs a hunch.
It's like compressed data.
Yes, it's a highly complex judgment based on years of accumulated specialized experience compressed into an intuitive feeling. But whether it's a raw emotion of panic or a highly complex intuition of market trends, it belongs under the red hat. It is vital to get it out in the open without demanding an immediate logical defense.
Now, I have to admit, and I think a lot of listeners will feel this way too, saying something out loud like, putting on my red hat, I'm really angry about this new production schedule, feels incredibly artificial. It feels stilted and, robotic. You feel a bit silly doing it at first.
It does feel artificial, but the author argues that this artificiality is actually its greatest superpower. It creates distance.
How so?
Well, normally, if someone is intensely angry in a meeting, they become the anger. They sulk, they get passive-aggressive, they derail the logic of the meeting for an hour by picking fights over minor details. The emotion hijacks their entire identity.
That sounds familiar.
Right. But the red hat acts like a mechanical toggle switch. It allows a person to formally switch into the emotion mode, vent the feeling, be heard, have it validated on the map, and then crucially, physically or metaphorically take the hat off and return to being an objective thinker. It contains the emotional blast radius. You are not an angry person. You are just a thinker who is currently wearing the red hat.
Wow, it's a brilliant psychological pressure valve. Okay, so let's look at our map now. We have the cold facts of the white hat laid out. We have the hot emotions and intuitions of the red hat clearly marked.
Let's start.
Once those are on the table, the human brain naturally, almost compulsively, wants to look for the pitfalls. We want to assess the risks of the terrain we've just mapped. This brings us to the hat we are all, by far, most familiar with. The most deeply ingrained, well-worn hat in the Western world. The black hat.
The black hat. Think of a judge's solemn black robes. Think of caution, survival, and stern reality. The black hat is the survival mode. It is the dedicated hat for critical thinking, risk assessment, and pointing out exactly why something will fail, why it costs too much, why it violates company policy, or why it might be outright illegal.
And we have to be clear about the mechanics here. Why is this hat so dominant? The book explained it is entirely based on a deeply ingrained natural evolutionary mechanism in the human brain. The mismatch mechanism.
Yes, evolutionary biology is at play here. When an early human or an animal is foraging in the forest, it has a stored mental pattern of what safe, edible berries look like.
Right.
If it sees a new bush with berries that do not perfectly match that safe pattern, maybe they're a slightly different shade of red, or the leaves are serrated differently, the mismatch mechanism fires instantly. It screams, danger, poison. It doesn't analyze the berry, it just flags the mismatch. This is how we survive in a hostile world.
So it's basically a reflex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The black hat is the formalization of this biological mismatch mechanism in a business setting. It points out how a new idea does not match our past experience, our available budget, our engineering capabilities, or our ethical standards.
And let's be totally clear, because sometimes people read about the six hats and think the goal is just to be relentlessly positive. Not true. According to the book, the black hat is an excellent hat. It is arguably the most vital hat for preserving our lives and our businesses.
Oh, without question.
It is the absolute bedrock of critical thinking and Western civilization. Without the black hat, we would constantly be doing illegal, bankrupting, or fatal things. We would invest our entire treasury in obvious scams. We would build bridges that collapse. The problem we face is not the black hat itself.
The problem is It's profound, unchecked overuse.
The analogy the author uses is perfect, and I think about it all the time now. Food is excellent. Food is essential for life. You will die without it. But if you sit down and eat nothing but giant, heaping bowls of pasta for every single meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every single day, you are going to ruin your health.
Too much of a good thing.
Exactly. The black hat is the exact same way. It is essential. But if it is your only diet, it's toxic. Let me use a modern corporate analogy. Imagine a tech company that over-indexes entirely on their cybersecurity and legal compliance teams.
Those teams are vital.
Right. But if the legal and security teams are allowed to veto every single line of code and every new product feature before it's even tested because they find a 1% risk, the company will be perfectly safe and perfectly bankrupt in a year because they will never ship a product.
That's exactly it. People who build their entire professional identity around being the permanent devil's advocate, the people whose only contribution to a meeting is yes, but, are gorging on pasta. They are abusing the black hat.
They really are.
And they do it because it's easy. It is always, always easier to destroy than to build. It is infinitely easier to criticize a new chair design than it is to design a new functional chair from scratch. If a colleague presents a simple chair, the black hat thinker calls it boring and derivative.
Yep.
If the colleague presents an ornate, complex chair, the black hat thinker calls it pretentious and expensive to manufacture. Because of our Socratic argument culture, people feel they are making a massive intellectual contribution just by finding the 5% of an idea that is flawed, while completely ignoring the 95% that might be brilliant.
It's so true. So in the six-hat system, the black hat is given a very specific, highly dedicated time. The facilitator explicitly asks everyone in the room to put on their black hats. Okay, team, black hat time. I want you to be as ruthlessly critical, cautious, and pessimistic as possible. Find every trapdoor, tear this idea apart.
Give it everything you've got.
And everyone does it together, in parallel. But the key, the absolute linchpin of the system is that once the blue hat facilitator says the black hat comes off, that critical behavior must immediately stop.
Hard stop.
You are not allowed to revert back to criticism when the group has moved on to seeking solutions. The black hat is used to spot procedural errors in thinking and to heavily map out future risks, but it is explicitly not an invitation to revert to a sprawling, unstructured argument. You just clearly note the danger on the map, you draw a skull and crossbones next to it, and you move on.
Which is absolutely essential for progress, because if we only ever look for the dangers, if we only ever focus on what could go wrong and why we shouldn't do something, we would be entirely paralyzed. We would never take a single step forward into the unknown. To balance the heavy caution of the black hat, we must actively and deliberately seek out the value in an idea. We have to look for the upside. And that requires formally switching to the yellow hat.
The yellow hat, think of sunshine. Think of brightness, optimism, and dawn. This is the mode of logical optimism. Under the yellow hat, you are actively seeking value, benefits, and constructive proposals. And here is the catch, which surprised me. This is actually much harder work than the black hat.
It is significantly harder. And again, it comes back to biology. Unlike the mismatch mechanism for danger, which fires automatically to save our lives, the human brain does not possess a natural automatic mechanism for finding value in a completely new idea.
We aren't wired for it.
Exactly. We don't have an evolutionary alarm bell that rings and says, hey, great opportunity here. Therefore, we have to consciously, deliberately develop what the book calls value sensitivity. We have to train ourselves to look for the upside with the exact same rigorous intensity that we look for the downside.
And that takes real, sweaty intellectual discipline. The author calls the yellow hat speculative positive. It means looking forward into the future, which by definition is always uncertain, and deliberately choosing to assume the best possible scenario. You are speculating that an action will have worth.
It's a thought experiment.
Right. And this is a great built-in filter.
Yeah.
Because if you force yourself to envision the absolute best-case scenario for an idea, if everything goes perfectly right and the resulting benefits are still weak or unexciting, then you know right away it's a bad idea and not worth pursuing. But you have to run that optimistic thought experiment first before you kill it with the black hat.
Exactly. The yellow hat forces you to rigorously explore the if conditions. It's not about ignoring reality, it's about projecting positive scenarios logically. If interest rates fall by 2% next quarter, what specific opportunities does that create for our pricing strategy?
Yeah, that makes sense.
If this new untested marketing channel actually takes off, how does that change our customer acquisition cost? You are actively building a logical foundation for optimism. It's not just blind cheerleader hope. It requires you to find the reasons, the data, and the logical support for why an idea has value.
And I want to clarify a vital distinction that the book makes here, because it's so easy to get this confused, and I definitely did it first. The yellow hat is not about creativity.
That's a huge point.
Creativity is the green hat, which we'll get to in a moment. You can be an incredibly powerful, highly effective yellow hat thinker without ever having a truly original creative thought in your entire life. Yellow hat thinking is deeply concerned with effectiveness, efficiency, and making things happen in the real world.
It's practical.
Very. It is perfectly valid yellow hat thinking to take an old, proven, boring idea from a completely different industry and apply it constructively to your current problem. It's about building, applying, and recognizing value, not necessarily inventing something out of thin air.
That's right. It's a hat of the savvy entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs often don't invent the new technology at all. They simply have the highly developed value sensitivity to look at an existing situation through the yellow hat and see a profitable application that everyone else who was blinded by their cautious black hats completely missed. They see the value in the mundane.
But what happens when old ideas and existing solutions simply aren't enough? What happens when a company is truly stuck, the market has completely shifted, and we need to break entirely out of our habitual patterns?
That is when we need the energy of vegetation, of growth, of new leaves and branches pushing through the soil. We need to put on the green hat. This is the dedicated, unconstrained mode for creative thinking, for lateral thinking, for generating completely new alternatives and fresh, bizarre concepts.
And just like with the other hats, dedicating specific, formal time to this changes the entire dynamic and power structure of a meeting. In a normal corporate setting, creativity is often viewed as a rare gift, the exclusive domain of the idea person, maybe the eccentric creative director in marketing, or the lone wolf brainstormer.
Yeah, the creative types.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone else in the room just sits back, arms crossed, waiting to pounce on the creative ideas with their black hats.
Yeah.
But when the blue hat facilitator says, okay, everyone, put down your pens, we are doing 10 minutes of green hat thinking on this specific problem, the expectation entirely shifts.
Everyone's on the hook.
Everyone, from the CFO to the intern, is legally required by the rules of the game to make a creative effort. The book notes a fascinating psychological phenomenon here. People are remarkably good at playing the game they are asked to play. People who swore for decades they weren't creative suddenly start generating brilliant ideas, simply because the intense pressure of immediate judgment has been removed and the expectation of effort has been applied to them.
The core idiom of the green hat, and this is perhaps one of the most powerful paradigm-shifting concepts in the entire book, is this: movement instead of judgment. I really want to emphasize that for you. Movement instead of judgment.
It requires a total suspension of how we normally process thoughts. In traditional thinking, as we've discussed, we use an idea to judge it. An idea is presented, and we immediately ask, does it fit what we already know? Is it factually right or wrong? Does it match our budget?
Standard black hat stuff.
Right. That is the backward-looking effect of an idea. But with the green hat, we use an idea exclusively for its forward effect. We use the idea as a stepping stone. We ask, where does this idea take me? What does it lead to? We are moving forward from the idea, regardless of how absurd, illegal, or physically impossible it might seem at first glance.
To facilitate this bizarre forward movement, the author invented a conceptual tool called PO, P-O. It stands for provocative operation. Think of PO as waving a giant white flag of truce on the battlefield of a meeting.
I love Poe.
It's so useful. If you introduce an idea by saying the word PO, you are officially signaling to the room, I know what I am about to say is completely absurd, illogical, and impossible. You are not allowed to shoot it down with your black hat. We are going to use this absurdity purely as a stepping stone to see where it moves us.
It acts as a deliberate, mechanical shock to the system. It jerks our brains out of their comfortable, historical, Aristotelian patterns. Normal logic requires a solid reason for saying something before you say it. A provocation doesn't have a reason until after it is said, and you trace where the movement leads you.
Exactly.
Okay, let's make this concrete, because this is where the magic happens. Let's walk through some of the specific, brilliant examples of provocations from the text. Imagine an engineering meeting about car design. They are stuck. Someone says, Poe, cars should have square wheels.
And instantly, everyone wants to reject it.
Immediately. Every engineer's black hat wants to scream about physics, fuel efficiency, and a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
Stupid idea. But under the green hat, we look for movement. Square wheels. Well, what does a square wheel actually do?
It stays flat on the ground.
Exactly. It has a flat edge. A flat edge provides a massive amount of surface area and friction. Friction allows for incredibly sudden stops or sharp, gripping turns. Okay, maybe that movement leads to a new concept for an emergency braking system that deploys a flat, high-friction pad in a crash. Or maybe a novel type of tire tread that flattens out dynamically for specific terrains. You move from the utter absurdity of a square wheel to a highly practical, innovative engineering concept.
Another famous example from the author's own consulting work is brilliant. It involved a massive problem with river pollution. A factory was dumping toxic waste into a river, ruining the water supply for everyone downstream. Regulations weren't working, so the provocation was introduced. A polluting factory should be downstream of itself.
Which is logically, physically impossible. A factory cannot exist in two places at once on a linear river.
Exactly. The black hat would kill it in 1 second. But what is the movement? What is the conceptual stepping stone? The movement is the core concept that the factory should be forced to be the very first entity to suffer the consequences of its own actions.
Okay, I see where this is going.
This conceptual stepping stone eventually led to an incredibly elegant real-world solution. It led to actual legislation requiring that if you build a factory on a river, your water intake pipe, the water you pull in to run your own machinery, must be located downstream from your own waste output pipe.
That is genius.
The factory literally becomes the first to sample its own pollution. If they dump toxins, they destroy their own machinery first. A brilliant, practical, highly effective regulatory solution born entirely from a literal, physical impossibility.
It's incredible. The book also mentions the origin of the Neighborhood Watch program. The police force was overwhelmed. The provocation was, every single citizen becomes a policeman. You move from that absurdity, which would be a vigilante nightmare, to the highly practical idea of citizens acting as the organized eyes and ears of the community, which is now standard practice globally.
The book also details a more structured way to force this movement called the random word technique. When a team is completely out of ideas, you literally open a dictionary, blindly point to a random noun, and force a connection between that random word and your problem.
It sounds like a party game.
It kind of is. But the brain is an incredible pattern-making machine. If you give it two completely unrelated points, it will fight to build a bridge between them, jarring you into a completely new pattern of thought.
Yes. The cigarette example from the book perfectly illustrates this. Let's say the problem is how to make cigarettes safer, to stop people from falling asleep and burning their houses down. The team is stuck. The random word chosen from the dictionary is frog.
Right, frog.
What is the movement? How does a frog relate to a cigarette? Well, a frog's primary characteristic is jumping or hopping. How does a cigarette hop? Maybe it hops over something. Maybe it hops out. That strange movement leads to the idea of a cigarette that somehow goes out by itself after a short time.
Which is a real product.
Yes, which leads to the highly practical concept of shorts, a brand of cigarettes designed with less tobacco for a quick 2-minute smoke break,
Right.
minimizing the risk of it being left burning unattended. You would never, ever arrive at that solution through linear, analytical, step-by-step thinking. You have to jump sideways.
So if you are sitting at your desk right now wondering how to use this, the green hat forces you to accept that there are always alternative routes. It introduces the vital concept of the creative pause. Even when things are going perfectly smoothly, even when your current process is highly profitable and there is no obvious problem to solve, the green hat thinker formally forces a pause. They ask, is there an alternative way to do this? Forcing that pause, dedicating just 5 minutes to green hat movement, can yield massive, unexpected breakthroughs that keep a company ahead of the curve.
So what does this all mean? Let's look at the chaos we've unleashed. We've got a conference table covered in cold hard facts. We've aired all our messy emotional baggage and gut feelings. We've thoroughly mapped out all the fatal risks and legal traps. We've speculated on the maximum positive financial benefits. And we've brainstormed a dozen crazy lateral square-wheeled alternatives.
It's a lot of map.
If a meeting actually did all this in real time, it sounds like it could easily devolve into an absolute circus. Who keeps the whole thing from falling apart? How do we string this all together?
That is the role of the sixth and final hat. The blue hat. Think of the blue sky that arches over and covers everything. Think of the grand overview. The blue hat is the conductor of the orchestra.
The boss hat.
Exactly. It is the hat of process control, metacognition, and discipline. When you are wearing the blue hat, you are no longer thinking about the subject matter itself. You aren't thinking about the car design or the marketing budget. You are thinking about the thinking process.
The blue hat designs the software, or the choreography, for the meeting. At the very beginning of the session, the blue hat is put on to define exactly why we are here, what the precise problem is, and what sequence of hats we're going to use to tackle it. It sets the agenda.
It creates the map-making schedule.
Right. Okay, team, we're going to do 10 minutes of white hat to get the facts, 5 minutes of red to get our feelings out. Then we'll spend 20 minutes on black hat risks.
And during the meeting, the blue hat is the enforcer. It maintains the absolute discipline of the game. If it's yellow hat time and someone inevitably starts complaining about a budget risk, the blue hat steps in and says, "That is valid black hat thinking, but we are in yellow hat time. Please hold that thought until we switch hats." This raises an important question. Who exactly wears the blue hat? Typically, it is the chairperson, the manager, or the designated facilitator of the meeting. They maintain a permanent, overarching blue hat role to guide the process. But, and this is a massive shift in corporate power dynamics, anyone in the meeting can put on the blue hat at any time to make a procedural suggestion.
Okay, I have to push back here on the reality of corporate hierarchy. It sounds great in theory that anyone can wear it.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out? If the CEO or the VP of sales starts criticizing an idea out of turn, how does a junior project manager wearing the blue hat actually stop them without getting fired?
It's a great question. And it comes back to the psychological trick of the rules of the game. If you just tell the CEO, "You're being too negative, stop it," they will get defensive and crush you. But the six hats method depersonalizes the correction. The junior employee can say, "Putting on my blue hat for a second, I think we've drifted into black hat risk assessment, but the agenda has us in green hat brainstorming for another 5 minutes. Should we switch hats or stick to the agenda?" You aren't attacking the CEO's idea or their authority. You are simply pointing out a violation of the mutually agreed upon rules of the game. It allows for upward management without the friction of personal ego.
Wow. That is a subtle but incredibly powerful tool for navigating office politics. The blue hat is also responsible for framing the questions we ask. The book differentiates between fishing questions and shooting questions.
Oh, I like this concept.
Yeah. Fishing questions are exploratory, like throwing bait in the water onto the white hat to see what data you catch. What do we know about the Asian market? Shooting questions are used to check a specific targeted point, usually with a yes or no answer. Did our competitor launch their product in Asia last week? The blue hat ensures the right type of question is being asked at the right time so the group doesn't waste time.
And when conflicting ideas inevitably arise on our map, because parallel thinking doesn't mean perfect harmony, the blue hat manages them without resorting to an argument. Instead of letting two people fight over whether idea A or idea B is correct, the blue hat facilitator uses what the book calls the best home method.
I love this method. Let's break it down.
Okay. The facilitator stops the argument and asks, "Okay, let's look at this logically. Under what specific set of circumstances would idea A be the absolute right choice? Let's define the world where idea A wins. And conversely, under what different set of circumstances would idea B be the right choice?"
It completely neutralizes the conflict. Both parties get to see their idea validated as correct within a certain context. The ego thread is removed.
Okay.
And then, once you have defined the two different sets of circumstances, the group simply puts the white hat back on, looks at the actual data, and determines which set of circumstances currently exists in the real world. The map makes the decision for you. Finally, at the end of the session, the blue hat is explicitly used to demand summaries, finalize the map, and lay out the concrete next steps.
It is the ultimate antidote to that awful meeting that ends with everyone closing their laptops, looking at each other and saying, "So, what did we actually decide to do?" The blue hat ensures there is a crystal clear outcome, even if the defined outcome is simply identifying exactly what white hat information is still missing before a final decision can be made.
If we look back at the journey we've taken over this deep dive, it represents a fundamental, necessary evolution in how we process information together as human beings. We are moving away from the chaotic, ego-driven, adversarial system designed by the Greek Gang of Three over 2 millennia ago. We are abandoning the instinct to carve away at each other's ideas like reductive blocks of marble.
Instead, we are adopting the parallel, highly cooperative system of map-making. We are separating our complex, tangled thinking into distinct, manageable modes. We gather the cold white hat facts. We acknowledge and validate the hot red hat emotions without demanding justification.
We rigorously chart the black hat risks to ensure survival.
We actively seek out the yellow hat values and benefits. We grow the wild lateral green hat alternatives.
And we do it all under the careful, disciplined choreography of the blue hat conductor.
And most importantly, we do it by treating these hats as temporary behaviors we can all adopt, not as permanent labels that define who we are or limit our potential.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that builds on everything we've discussed today. We have spent this entire time talking about using the six hats in corporate boardrooms, in high-stakes project meetings, and in team collaborations. But what if you applied this exact same framework to your own internal monologue?
Oh, that is a fascinating application. I love that.
Right. Think about the last time you made a mistake at work, or even in your personal life. You likely lay awake in bed at 2:00 a.m. beating yourself up over it. If you analyze that internal voice, you were likely trapped in a destructive loop of pure, unadulterated black hat thinking. You were just obsessing over the risks, the failures, and how bad it was.
It's so easy to get stuck there.
What if, in the privacy of your own mind, you actively, consciously forced yourself to take off the black hat and put on the yellow hat for exactly 2 minutes? What if you forced your brain to find the constructive value or the hidden lesson in that painful mistake? Or what if you put on the green hat to find a completely lateral, bizarre way to fix it that you couldn't see because you were paralyzed by fear? The six hats can revolutionize a boardroom and save a company millions, but they can also fundamentally rewire your own mind for peace and productivity.
It's a really powerful tool for self-management, not just team management.
Absolutely. If this deep dive changed how you view collaboration, how you navigate conflict, and maybe even how you view your own internal thinking process, we want you to join our community. Subscribe to the Decode Deep Dive channel so you never miss an analysis. Leave a comment below telling us which hat you naturally overuse. I know I'm guilty of living in the red hat a bit too often when I should probably be looking at the white hat data.
And I'm definitely guilty of overusing the black hat.
We all have our defaults, and most importantly, we highly encourage you to go buy Edward de Bono's incredible book, Six Thinking Hats. We've only scratched the surface of the psychology here. Buy the book, study it, and fully master these essential thinking skills. Until next time, keep exploring the map and keep your thinking parallel.